Moving back to the ceasefire in Gaza, what's happening with the ceasefire? What is Israel saying about Egypt? What's actually happening? Okay, on the ground, Israel says we sent a delegation to Egypt. Tomorrow, the phase one ends. Phase one is done tomorrow. Israel already sent a delegation twice to Cairo, but they sent a delegation with different intentions. We're speaking about the appointment of Ron Dermer, one of Benjamin Netanyahu's favorites, as the head of the delegation. He is leading the delegation. He is telling them what to do. He's following the timeline of Benjamin Netanyahu, and he's trying to delay as much as possible. Israel went twice to Cairo so far, but they did not go on the basis that they began the ceasefire with, the ceasefire agreement with. They're going with new proposals. What are these proposals? Well, firstly, and that's the big problem, we're not going to withdraw from the Philadelphia corridor. That's number one. What do you mean? On day 50, which is in 8 days, Israel's supposed to completely withdraw from the Philadelphia corridor. Egypt reported from day one that they withdrew a lot of their forces, but they have some forces remaining. Philadelphia corridor is, of course, the whole border between Gaza and Egypt, or the Egyptian Rafah and the Gazan Rafah. Now they're saying, hold on a second, we're not going to withdraw from the Philadelphia corridor. And, Hamas, they need to disarm, and they can't have a role in the day after in Gaza. Again, moving the argument that's supposed to be against them. It's Israel that doesn't have the right to exist as an apartheid entity. It's Israel that must be dismantled. It's the regime of Israel committing a genocide in broad daylight that must be removed, and everyone in the world must ensure that they're not there to commit another genocide. Isn't that the case? However, they're talking about the victims, of course. And they can't be there. Okay. What are Hamas saying? Hamas is telling them, hold on, we're not in the negotiations. We're not negotiating. What do you mean you're not negotiating? Who's Israel negotiating with? Hamas are not in the negotiations. Today, Tahir al-Nunu, a representative of Hamas, he made a statement. He's saying we're not part of phase two. Israel delayed the beginning for too long, and any extension of phase one is not possible now. It's not, in these circumstances, we're not negotiating. So who is Israel negotiating with? Hamas are doing to Israel what they did during Yahya Sinwar's time. Israel thought that by getting rid of Yahya Sinwar, they will have someone a little bit more lenient. We can probably impose something, only for them to realize immediately after his passing, after his martyrdom, they continued down the same path, and now they're doing the same thing to Israel. We are not negotiating. They can talk as long as until they get back to us with the conditions that we agreed upon to enter the ceasefire. Yeah, we'll consider that. We'll have a look, and we will get into the ceasefire. But it didn't stop there. Hamas are adding conditions now. Told Israel, we are no longer able to release Israeli prisoners in the same manner that we did before. And that was evident from now. That was evident from when Hamas released the bodies to Egypt, and they refused to release Israelis before Israel releases Palestinians. They said it has to be simultaneous, meaning Israel made it more difficult on itself because of Benjamin Netanyahu's arrogance and acts, this very, very amateur, this very stupid way of trying to achieve an image of victory. He made it more difficult for Israel because Hamas will not be releasing Israeli prisoners of war unless it's simultaneous with Israel. This is at least what we know now. We don't know of any more conditions, but Hamas are well known with their tough negotiations. Anthony Blinken confirmed that. Witkoff even said it's not going to be easy because they know them. Why? Because Hamas know who they're dealing with. So, Israel wants to add conditions? No, we are going to add conditions. But there's another thing that Hamas said that was very interesting. Hamas said, we actually have the power to force Israel to continue with the ceasefire agreement. They're very confident. Why are they so confident? Are they so confident because they know something that we don't know because the ceasefire agreement hasn't been made public? Are they so confident because they know that by entering the ceasefire, Israel agrees to completely get to the last phase of the ceasefire, and this hasn't been made public as part of the deal so that Israel can save face? Likewise with the United States, looking to ask AI to generate an image of victory because they fail to achieve one in real life. That's what we understand from what's happening. And now more and more revelations are coming. Firstly, Argamani, the Israeli prisoner of war, who was released in one of the very few Israeli operations that actually rescued Israelis from Gaza at the cost of slaughtering 400 Palestinians and killing 3 Israelis too. But she's saying the whole building collapsed on me at the time. And one of my colleagues died. One of my Israeli friends died. Again, the Israeli prisoners of war are confirming that they are being killed, and they have been killed in Gaza because of the Israeli bombings. One of very few. Clearly now you're talking about Israel releasing prisoners of war only through negotiations. What else happened? Something very important happened. Israel released the inquiry. The Israeli army, they released the inquiry about the 7th of October, during which they said what Hamas told us from the beginning. What did they say? They said the Gaza division was eliminated in 2 hours, with the majority of them being killed and many being taken as prisoners of war. Massive failure confirmed by the IDF. They published that report already, but there were problems upon the release of the report. What were the problems? Well, number one, they didn't hand the copy to Benjamin Netanyahu before the release. Number two, they didn't give the families of the prisoners of war of Israel any details about it. Both of them were very angry, especially Benjamin Netanyahu. Why would the IDF do that? It's because Herzi Halevi is still there. Herzi Halevi resigned after pressure from Benjamin Netanyahu. Now he has Zamir in. He's coming in next week. But Herzi Halevi was like, I don't need to tell the prime minister. I can immediately release it, confirming that they were humiliated and that they were defeated on the 7th of October, and reports confirming that they indicated there were accidental killings of Israelis from the IDF on the 7th of October. Not deliberate Hannibal directive, like Yoav Gallant confirmed, who oversaw those actions, but they're trying to run away from it because it's going to be too difficult to swallow for the Israeli public, although many of them already know that, but they just don't want to admit it. It's more convenient for them not to admit that their own state killed their own people on the 7th of October, only to blame everything on Hamas. And also, the massive failure with the intelligence. They said the Shabak and the Aman completely collapsed. So the Shin Bet and the military intelligence director, they completely collapsed in the beginning of the operation. For 4 hours, for 5 hours, we did not really know what to do. Many of our forces were hesitant to go into the areas that Hamas and the Palestinian resistance invaded, in fear of Hamas, So they're admitting with their inquiry that they have been defeated and they have been humiliated in Gaza in just in the first 2 hours. Yet there are some people who are arguing that actually no. Moving back to Egypt. In Egypt, a previous Egyptian diplomat, he said that Israel is breaching the agreement and does not intend to stick to it. Then Katz, he said, we're controlling the Philadelphia corridor. We're going to continue controlling the Philadelphia corridor. The tensions are escalating more and more between Egypt and Israel. More figures from Israel saying that we don't care what Egypt thinks about the Philadelphia corridor anymore, because Egypt breached the ceasefire agreement that we have with them. More talks, more studies in Israel about how to fight the Egyptian army. The still current, and soon to be out, Chief of Staff Herzi Halevi saying that Egypt is not a state that when we're at war with at the time, but that can change in the future. All of these things are very serious. They're very serious between Egypt and Israel. And it's clear as daylight that the tensions are not only restricted between Egypt and Israel, but they also stretch to the United States. So what do we have now? We have a case of Hamas and Egypt having a position, and the United States and Israel having another position. Donald Trump, regardless of anyone who's saying that he's playing a 5D chess game here with Israel, and it's all an act, and he eventually wants to get rid of the lobby, and he eventually wants to do this. Regardless of that argument, he's saying to Israel, do whatever you want to do whatever you see fit. Threatening with hell again, and sometimes his hell includes Israel, sometimes his hell includes only Gaza, and then ethnically cleansing. Witkoff is saying you need to go. It's 15 to 25 years. You can't stay here. Psychological warfare against the population. But clearly there are tensions, and Egypt is insisting on Israel withdrawing from the Philadelphia corridor. Egypt will not accept Israel remaining in the Philadelphia corridor. And if Israel insists on remaining in the Philadelphia corridor, that will increase the tensions even more. It could potentially reach a level where it would be untenable for Egypt to continue with the mediation. By the way, Egypt has taken this position of a mediator for a very long time, especially with any escalation in Gaza. But now they're getting further and further, although Israeli delegations are going there, from Israel. Is Israel playing another game? Could be. Why? Because we saw them playing that game. Netanyahu, how many U-turns did he make? He said, I'm not going to withdraw from Netzarim. He withdrew. He said, I'm going to delay, and then he withdrew. He said, I'm going to delay the release of Palestinian prisoners once. He later released them hours later. He said, I'm not going to release them again, and then he released them again. What did he do throughout this whole process? Get a very temporary kick, a very temporary image of someone who has some sort of an authority, an image of victory in the eyes of his cult in Israel, anyone who supports him, in Israel mainly, really. But the major thing that he's done is he's made it more difficult. He's made it more difficult on himself. Now Benjamin Netanyahu is facing more conditions from Hamas. He's facing lack of release of Israeli prisoners of war unless it's simultaneous with the resistance. And he's facing a position of Hamas not negotiating with him altogether. And by the way, for any of you who think there could be like an extension, Hamas will release some of the prisoners of war, they can dream on. Hamas isn't releasing anyone up until Israel adheres to the agreement. And for some reason, Hamas has confidence that they're able to enforce that on Israel. Again, could be due to certain clauses that did not come to light, that force Israel and make it obligatory on them to adhere to the ceasefire.